Okay, thanks a lot. Okay, dear speakers, we are starting. Okay. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to the NASSCOM THCI AISS event 2020. We now move forward with our next session in a row with an electric line of speakers deliberating on the emerging topic, blind experts on your network. We would like to invite you, the speakers. We have Mr. Kaplesh Doshi, CISO, FIS Global, who will be moderating the session. Then we have Mr. Badrinarayanan Srinivasan, who is the Director of Application Engineering, Keys Insight Technologies. Then we have Mr. Alvin, who is a Field Chief Security Officer at Infoblox. Over to you, Mr. Kaplesh.
Yeah, thanks, Aishan. Hi, everyone. I'm Kalpesh, and I have the honor of, kind of, I wouldn't really call it moderating, but leading important discussion about blind spots. The topic is very relevant because the way we have seen a significant explosion of perhaps only the devices which have connected during the pandemic, the count of devices which are connected, let's say today, to networks remotely is huge. To give a scale, in the earlier, I would always call it, it's a pre-COVID and post-COVID, right? So the pre-COVID era, you would always see that not more than 10% of your workforce would be working remotely. Today, the situation is exactly reversed, where you have more than 90% of your workforces working remotely, and you hardly have about 10% for workforces which which have a responsibility or who are really forced to work really from the office environment. So we're seeing a rapid change. We're seeing a lot of adoption of technology. I was reading a lot of articles, and if there's something that has been a savior, right? I'm sure there are a lot of warriors fighting the battle to make sure that we find a cure. There are preventive medicines and all of that. However, from an economic perspective, if there has been a savior, I believe it's your networks, because the way the networks were able to scale up, the way we were able to allow users to carry out their normal responsibilities, perhaps sitting at your homes, perhaps connecting from unsecure networks. I think that really did have a major contribution, right? Why we did all of that, right? We didn't have the luxury of time. We didn't have the luxury of planning, because every day, we were taking one day at a time. So every day, I'm sure everybody who was a decision-making, had a decision-making responsibility, were struggling to make the right decisions. And you didn't have the luxury to think about a month or a quarter or a year. You had to think about there and then. So when we had to enable some of this, there is always a chance that there are blind spots. There are always, the pandemic itself opened up a lot of challenges for, a lot of organizations and a lot of the CISOs and the CXOs and the CIOs. So we all know what is blind spot is something that is there, but, for whatever reasons, we are missing it, we are not paying attention to that. And that can cause, I would say, that could have consequences, or that could have adverse impact on the organization, right? People driving do know, right, that blind spots could be through various reasons, right? So there is a lot of, it's a very simple thing. There are challenges in your network. There are vulnerabilities in a network, but it's about unknown known. So, you really don't know about it, but they are existing. You know there's something wrong, but you don't know where it is wrong. So that's what, we're trying to address. It's a very interesting topic, and, we have Alvin and Badri with us, who really specialize in terms of networks, in terms of products and in terms of services. So before we really start with that, I would, request them to quickly introduce and perhaps share their insights on the topic itself. When we talk about blind spots, how would they define it for a layman, and how could we really simplify it before we onboard with the further questions? So Alvin, Badri, I would leave it to you to pick up any sequence, but over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Couplet, for the very warm introduction, and thank you very much to everybody. Um, I find whenever we discuss with many of our clients around their need for visibility, it always hinges on the need to ensure that they can do one of more of the following things. Number one, they need visibility of everything that's traversing their network for security reasons, but also for them to determine and ensure that they are able to continue to deliver availability of services and resources to the people in need of those services internally as well as externally. So this is where they take a very proactive view that if they have some kind of network dashboard that tells them all the devices that's connected within their network, they are able to look at number one, capacity planning, number two, load balancing of traffic and of services to ensure that the people who need those services receive those services. But on the other side, because security and networks are quite intertwined in this day and age, and security and network also changes when the business change, as you have seen, as you know, Kaplish has clearly pointed out. Before COVID and now post-COVID, we find that we have more and more resources working at the edge, and probably in an unmanaged situation, and a situation that is invisible to us, that we need to get that visibility so that we can manage, we can control, and we can protect. It is also, to my knowledge, that many executives are very uncomfortable that in some of these instances, the people working at the edge or working from home are not necessarily using office resources with the necessary enterprise-grade security. And therefore, definitely, they are really, really keen in really driving this visibility. And therefore, now in this day, this is one of the blind spots that is of top of mind among many executives. And this is just in relation to COVID. The next wave that we're also seeing, or we are currently experiencing, is the rise of and the deployment of IoT, whereby these are new devices, sensors. Either they do machine-to-machine communication or just one way, the IoT device being a sensor is just sending telemetry back to the data consolidator for further analysis. Those do not have security on it, and we may not always have visibility of those devices as well. So that's another area, another blind spot in the network. And the reason why blind spots become very uncomfortable is because they can lead into a data breach, a backdoor, or even a rogue device connected to the environment that allows a hacker to come in to attack. And today, companies are very, very, very careful about this. With the rise of ransomware up to 7 times in the industry coming to the market, and with more and more reports of data exfil, they are really, really keen in this visibility.
Yeah, Alvin Badri here. Can I take over?
Sure.
Go ahead.
Sure, yeah, that well said by Alvin. I think he covered most of the points. Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, just to answer the first question, when we talk about blind spot, it's nothing but bring your own device, rogue IT, and wireless hotspots, botnets. So these are some of the things which could exploit the network weaknesses, and these are often blind spots unseen by the network administrators. So unnoticed network vulnerabilities can be termed as blind spots, especially as they pertain to application reliability, performance, and security. So it directly correlates to the network problems and outages, increased network security risk, and potential regulatory compliance issues as well.
True.
So that's where it's very critical that we address this problem by having the right network visibility. Right, to add to it, I'm also focusing on the topic name, blind spots on your network with rising traffic. Right, I think we talked about before COVID, after COVID. Definitely, the traffic was increasing, and now it is more accelerated with all these virtual and the cloud-based platforms coming into picture. So, in our ages, we talked about 1 gig interface, 10 gig interface, 40 gig, 100 gig has become legacy now. We are talking about 400 gig in terms of the network speed, and maybe by mid of next year we'll have 800 gig, which will be used majorly by the data centers. So these kind of technologies also driving. I mean, there is a need for speed. At the same time, it is also creating a lot of other issues which also become hidden unless we do specific activities or approach we make as a companies or enterprise. That's where I just want to give back to Kalpesh.
That's, yeah, I think Alvin Badri, you raised the right things that we have seen kind of explosion, right, in terms of devices being connected. And hence, we're seeing increase in the traffic. Yes, the plans to perhaps digitize were never that important or were never that urgent. So we are
Yeah.
seeing the scale at which the businesses are going online or the businesses are adopting digital platforms is phenomenal, right?
Yeah.
That again brings across to our next pertinent question. We put things in four perspectives: unknown, known, unknown, 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 known, and unknown, unknown, right? Let's look at it from unknown, known, wherein we are saying that we know the challenges and we're trying to work on, how to fix on that, right? So
Yeah.
just purely, again, always with you, purely from how the network traffic is increasing, right? Uh, what are the strategies organizations are adopting, right? It could be, I was looking at some of the research documents. I'm just looking at from a SOC perspective. They see even a small organization today gets about 5,000 alerts a week. And perhaps for a small organization that has a couple of people sitting there, managing their security, that would be overwhelming, right? Now, the same challenges kind of extend when you have so many devices trying to connect, right? You don't have control over the network devices. You don't know if they're configured securely. You don't really know, how are they really, are you having the right devices connecting to the network? So what are the strategies that you recommend, our folks to use, and how can they make good use of what is available today to address some of the challenges that the organizations face today?
Well, the beauty is that in any network, right, DNS is actually the foundation of the network. And in this day and age, and you rightly put as well, the pre and post-COVID, what I find right now is that in the post-COVID scenario, while companies were originally planning to embrace digital transformation, are now literally forced, to embrace transformation. So what we have seen is a tsunami of digital activities actually coming in. Now with that, as you also clearly pointed out, we find more and more devices demanding load, connection, as well as provision on the network. So this is where if you have a whitelist or if you have a managed list of devices who can connect and based on the prioritization and privilege by using DNS, DHCP, and IPAM to manage those connections and to also give you provision. So that's one angle, allowing the approved devices to come in and to use that. Another way is that then because of all these demands to ensure that you are able to provision the services, maybe you want to start different kinds of virtual machines to also cope with the workload that's required, spin it up. And again, this is where automation with the DDI or the automation of the allocation of the DNS, the IP leasing and then releasing and setting out those virtual machines. What used to take 14 days can be now done in a matter of within an hour through a DDI automation strategy. That's another way you can ensure that you manage all your known knowns. But when you come to a situation of your known and unknowns, this is where you play on the need for whitelists. So you have a list of devices, so you call them the managed and approved devices, right? That people are allowed to then gain access to the corporate network, either by VPN or even by what at InfoBlocks what we call our Blocks One cloud, our Blocks One Threat Defense cloud, whereby you log into there and that it becomes a sanitized connection from the cloud to your cloud service and everything, right? Then this becomes a case of managing your known and mitigating against unknown. In the case of unknown, I had a very interesting discussion with one of the government security agency, the regulators, and what they define as unknown is anything that is not on the whitelist. So they already know what is best practice, what is good practice for good cyber security and good visibility and good and approved devices. So anything outside of that, especially when it comes to wanting to access to critical information, is then blocked. And the only way that they can get access to it is only if they get special sanction and special approval only for a short period of time to get access to the information. And everything that they do is monitored so that there is no chance of a data exfiltration or no chance for them to drop a malicious malware attack, even if it's trying to come through the DNS or any other vectors that they try to circumvent in your defense in-depth strategy that you have rolled out for your organization. In terms of managing alerts, you are right. I'm getting a lot of companies who are telling me that they are going stir crazy with the number of alerts that they're experiencing. And and what we do is we try to help them by doing orchestration. We know that on a daily basis there are lots of false positives, and in the false positive of a cyber attack, right, there may be one or two actual positives that actually is able to infiltrate into the organization. So what we do over here is that, again, looking at the DNS, your first line of defense, it can also your first line of contact, it can also be your first line of defense, and that DNS gives you that visibility, and that visibility then becomes the cornerstone of your cybersecurity. As a result of that, we are able to work with the existing stack and orchestrate with the existing solution that you have. Now, how do we do this? Say, for example, you detect a ransomware, or you detect a ransomware or a malicious malware attack coming through your email, which your sandbox might have missed, because the person might be working from home. Right now, he's connecting to your server, and this payload gets transferred into your network environment, or it's transferred into his machine. Now, with that visibility at the DNS level, we will be able to detect that, okay, something has happened because this payload is now trying to do a CNC communication back to the malicious server. Now, at the DNS level, at the DNS without threat defense, we will be able to detect that. And when we see that, they will work with and orchestrate with the network access control to block that. So when we block that, the IPAM, the IP address manager will capture the destination of where that file is going to. And because we know where's the destination of that IP, of the destination or the IP address of that malicious website, right, or that server, we can then write a policy to the firewall to tell it to block all traffic coming from this IP address, which is this malicious website. So by doing this, we already automatically remediate the solution while minimizing the amount of alerts. At the same time, we can also write a help desk ticket, by evoking on the ITMS software to tell IT or security that this machine 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 has been compromised, so please do something about it, as it is already quarantined. So these are some of the ways that we try to automate and orchestrate to help to alleviate the amount of repeatable tasks that a normal person, a normal IT professional who is burdened in the SOC, to relieve him of these responsibilities, only inviting him for human intervention for critical information. So raising the quality of work and raising his importance to mitigating against a network outage or a cyber hack.
Great. I think, Alvin, you covered the topic in depth, right? And I absolutely, I think great points that you raised were automation is a way forward, right? And I think the approach, because end of the day, it's all about, whether somebody can compromise you. So rather than trying to find out who all can compromise you, it's again, I always believe security is a lot of common sense. So if you are, if you apply them in the right sense, you would be secure. And you gave a beautiful example that rather than trying to identify who all are wrong, right? A concept of zero trust, where you don't trust anybody, right?
Yes.
And at the same time, you have a very strong lock, right? So even if something gets through, right, you know that your lock that you have would be DNS filtering, would be through mechanisms that you spoke about it. So rather than trying to find who all can have malice or an intention to rob you, what you're really doing is let's secure our homes with a great lock, and if the lock does its job, nevertheless, you'd have the bad players, but they'll not be able to impact you. I think
exactly.
I think that's a great one, and I think a very easy way to put it across. Something that looks complicated. Badri, on the same thing, right? Yeah, when you want to say something, please go ahead.
Sure.
No, I mean, the thing is that, when we drive automation, one of the biggest fears and pushbacks I often get from organization is, oh, you're going to make my people redundant. Well, actually, that's not the case. What we're trying to do right now is to elevate the quality of your workforce, because they need to have the intrinsic understanding of the entire workflow. And workflow in an organization changes when the company's business model changes, when the company's business workflow changes. And the need to align to those changes is where this person who fears that he might be displaced because of automation becomes really critical, because he will then need to, model that new, policies and workflow to that new business workflow. And once you maintain that alignment between technology, network, security, and the business, this is again another blind spot that hackers exploit as a vulnerability to infiltrate, to disrupt, and to drive network outage as well. Another blind spot.
Oh, great. Thank you, Alvin, for that. Badri, again, somebody who represents an industry that really provides niche and specialized services, right? I'm sure, you would have a lot of IP to protect. You work with large organizations. So what is your strategy for the known, right? And what would be your recommendations to safeguard yourselves, from the bad things or the bad actors?
Definitely, yeah. Okay, I would like to take this discussion in two ways. One is from the network test point of view, because I have a background of testing. And the second aspect, I would take these scenarios as network visibility point of view. So when we are talking about network testing, so typically in any organization, the way it starts is they will start with a smaller network, and then there'll be more branches and centralized and more sophisticated tools, etc. That's how any organization grows, or any data center, comes up. So typically what happens after a period of time, and if you see this is a crowded market, and there are a lot of vendors who come and say this, we all have the best solution, be it security, be it application monitoring, be it network performance monitoring, anywhere, any domain. And everyone is trying to have their own solution, and they're all good and a lot of these vendors are very specialized. So the issue is whether one solution is good enough for addressing the end-to-end, problem statements, right, or the practical scenarios. So that's where we need to pay some attention. So when we are talking about the network testing, how many times once we decide on the vendor, we get into some kind of staging lab where we want to replicate maybe our percentage of network traffic, and then we deploy those services. Maybe we would have done this in the initial stages, but as the network or the data center is growing, we just deploy solutions, and that's where after a certain point of time we get into a lot of issues, and that's where we will look for corrective solutions. So one of the recommendation or thought process is, why can't we test those devices in isolation? At the same time, we can also recommend a lot of organizations. Nowadays, it is picking up even in India. A lot of financial institutions, they are setting up their own POC labs, or even the service providers were doing this for a long time. So these are some of the best practices we can incorporate, especially on the critical infrastructures, where whenever we want to do change request, that doesn't go through unless my specific threshold test cases pass. So that is an approach which some of the companies are doing. I think more enterprise and medium and bigger companies should be adopting those practices. So that is on the test point of view. So coming to the security aspect, I think Alvin also covered some unique use cases, especially on the application side. I also want to point out, so now we have these fancier devices like IPS, IDS, WAF, which are all helping to protect the perimeters of any network. At the same time, they're all overburdened because of the rise in traffic, right? And these are expensive solutions. And, these licenses are expensive.
I think you've gone quiet.
Badri, we lost you. Yeah. Same here. I think, Badri, maybe you've gone on mute, or there's an issue with your. Badri,
Yeah.
we can't hear you.
We can't hear you. I'm not sure whether you can hear us as well.
Yeah, we can hear you now. Good.
Oh,
Okay.
sorry.
Yeah. Loose connection.
Yeah, blind spots.
Nice spot.
Yeah. Blind spot or bandwidth issue. Blind spot.
Yeah, I don't know. Okay, so those are, I think, I don't know where I missed. I was talking about the cyber security aspect, where
Right.
I think Alvin gave some example on some unique solutions, which can go into the application side of it. I am talking more from the network side, where we have the the IPS, IDS, and other advanced security appliances. Um, they're all overburdened because of the rise in traffic. So is there a way we can look at, how can I optimize those devices? They are required. At the same time, is there any best practices? Maybe I will be looking at creating one more layer of security, right? Where I think Alvin gave an example about the rogue IPs, right? So the unregistered IPs, the traffic sources which are coming from those kind of IPs are not required to be monitored by the security appliances, which could be a simple practical use case where we will straight away drop those IPs because we know that those IPs are bad, and I don't want to do any business with those kind of connections or transactions, or it may be coming from specific countries, so geo-based blocking. So maybe these are some of the practices we can incorporate when it comes to the cybersecurity. At the same time, we can also think about this cyber range. That is a new term which is not specific to, actually it came out especially in the defense establishments, but it's not necessarily limited to that particular domain. So now any industry, be it utility, be it infrastructure or finance sectors, I think everyone should be looking at having a cyber range, which is kind of a closed closed loop, staging lab where they'll be able to practice and equip the people who are managing the IT network or make them more skilled, to address these kind of issues which may arise. So these are some of the aspects when we look at the network test point of view. Maybe I'll take one more minute just to talk about the visibility side of it. Here we are talking about any organization. Again, they start with a simple firewall. Over a period of time, they get into sophisticated security appliances. And most of the time, initially, the thing was everything was out of band, meaning we don't do real-time analysis, right? Which has become a old story. There are pockets of requirements or specific use cases which require still the out-of-band kind of solution. But all the production network, all the bigger data centers or enterprises or financial companies are moving towards inline security, right? That's where all the vendors, their solutions are capable of inline. So when we talk about inline, these are connected in serial, right? I mean, the traffic comes into the firewall, then it goes to the WAF, and then SSL decryption, and these are connected to a sequence of, I would say the solutions are the box, and then the traffic comes out and it reaches the protected host. So here, since we are talking about blind spots, there are a lot of blind spots we may look into. If you see, these solutions are there to monitor the network, but what if these solutions or this particular appliance are not able to get the right traffic to be monitored, right? So that's where we can think about some of the best practices, how we can optimize these kind of use cases, especially whatever the traffic which is required to be monitored. That's what we want the monitoring tool to be monitored. We don't want to miss out anything. So that's where there are specific solutions. I would say the visibility architecture, right? We have to build it, which will be complementary to the network monitoring tools or the application monitoring tools. And we have specific devices. We call it as tabs, bypass, and network packet brokers. So these can play a major role when we are talking about blind spots in any network.
Great. I think, Badri, some very interesting points that you raised. And I completely agree with you. There cannot be any tool in the world today that can, where you can just plug it and, be rest assured that nothing will go wrong. End of the day, yeah, you have to find a balance between a tool, a technology, a process. And maybe you rightly said, that you may have the best of the tools, but what if it's not getting the right traffic to monitor? So, you are probably missing out on all the opportunities to even monitor the traffic. So it's about having the right processes. And I really like the point that we have to have a battle ready. I think that's again a military terminology. But even in the peace times, there are exercises. Why? Because whenever a war breaks out, you want your soldiers to be in the most fit condition. Same way, you invest on the people so that they're aware and they exactly know how to deal with it. So I think very interesting points that we reached on the known known. Again, I know we have a few minutes left, but I would like to cover even the other domains, right? Now, I think the next domain is a very important domain, which is known unknown, wherein I know that I don't know, right? And I believe that is where a lot of hysteria, a lot of fear, and a lot of panic buying and panic, sets in. And I think that's where we see that in the fear that I don't know something, or out of the fear that there will be something, in my network that is at risk, maybe a shadow IT, right? And shadow IT is a reality. While everybody would love to say that it doesn't exist, we all know that today anybody can pay probably for free or for a few dollars, they can have a server running. And if they have access to the data, they could have, your data could be hosted in a few minutes on a web server where you don't even have an idea about it. So there is adequate fears, and there are incidents, which kind of back those fears. But perhaps, from somebody who's specializing to provide those services, Alvin and Badru, your views, right? How much of a fear is fair, and where do people have to draw boundary? Because end of the day, right, when you're talking about 4,000 incidents for a small organization, what really sets in is because of the fear, you want to monitor everything, and then comes a stage where it cannot monitor everything, so you start impacting your quality, right? Automation also needs, again, a well, I would say, it needs to be well coupled with process and people. That doesn't happen. So where do you draw a line between the fear and being rational and making the most out of the fear and not losing the game to the fear? Anybody can go. So Battery, you can go first.
Battery, you want to go first?
No,
Battery,
I'll give the chance to you, as always.
Okay. We're following the hierarchy, so always you first.
Okay.
And second.
My general stand with technology. So this is just a general statement about technology. If the task you want to accomplish through technology is made easier by the employment of technology, right, then technology is the right tool. In the same way, if the task you want to complete can be resolved by a process or by a human activity, then use those. The fine line then comes in when you employ technology and it makes that process harder. Then that is the wrong application of technology. In the same way, when you deploy a process, it makes the task harder. A simple example I often use is, whenever we walk on the street, we have this nice paved cement road. But somewhere on that street, the garden next to it and everything, we see a dirt road, wearing away. This is where IT is imperative that the business analyst in the IT department or that IT and the business needs to really be aligned and understand how they need to collaborate to work together so that technology is then becoming technology, the deployment of technology, the use of technology, and the application of technology becomes an enabler. Sort of like now you have this dirt road veering left. Maybe now you pave the cement on that dirt road and then you clean away the old cement road so that it makes sense. And that is the exact reason why shadow IT, as in accidental shadow IT actually emerged. We find people turning to Dropbox or turning to storage devices and everything, right, to do better collaboration or to improve their productivity in the name of doing their job. Okay, and I'm talking about people with really good intentions over here, right? And that's because IT did not provision for this. And this is a lesson that IT can take a page from, that if they realize that their people are always using Dropbox, for example, to collaborate, then maybe it's time that IT institute a sharing platform for the organization so that they can eliminate shadow IT from the equation. And I've been in conversation with numerous organizations. When I speak with them from this angle, they realize that, yeah, actually he's right. They are doing this for the benefit of the company. Now, this is where the danger, this is where it becomes good. But the bad comes when you still, after you have deployed your working your sharing platform, that technology still persists, but not necessarily across the entire company right now, by a handful of individuals. So then you have a situation of maybe an intentional malicious act, or somebody who really doesn't know that you have implemented and still continue using it. So this is where you can start weeding off the whole intention of the workers within the organization, sort of like trying to address the known unknown. So answering your question around that, it's sort of like, people who are coming in and plugging a shadow IT device, a personal notebook, because they are only assigned with a desktop to work with, but they find that they are able to yield better productivity if they work on a notebook. So to remedy that, okay, approve that notebook, make it what you call it, an approved device. Try to manage it as far as you can, but without intrusion into that person's property, because now he's bringing in his own property. Or make it clear to him, I'll give you a company notebook and you do all company work on this and not on your personal notebook. This is where policy management then comes in. And this is how you mitigate against the known and unknown. More often than not, the known unknowns are situations whereby it comes from people with good intention, employees with good intentions, wanting to be more productive for the organization, but bringing in an element, making it known to you, but also bringing in an unknown element of potential risk. So at the end of the day, when you look at this kind of scenario, it's all about risk management. So you take a risk managed decision on how are you going to be managing that unknown. So sometimes if this person is a high value target, right, a person with a lot of access credentials and everything in the organization, maybe it's not a good idea for him to bring in his own machine unmanaged to connect to the network. Even though he has all the right credentials, he can log in from his own personal machine, as we have seen that some of us may have done in the past in our lives and so on. Mobile phones is a perfect example of that. For example, accessing sensitive emails on your personal mobile phone. If that person is a high value target, give him a corporate approved mobile phone and tell him that, I'm sorry, sir, if you are compromised, this is the ramification to the organization. Therefore, we really would appreciate if you use this corporate mobile phone to access all emails, because we know that, you want to stay productive and so on. I'm sure, being a rational person, he will understand and he will accept that discussion. If he refuses, say, I don't want to carry two devices, then you go for a container strategy. Protect those services in your mobile phone, or protect those services on your, on the laptop, that only when, let's say, a VPN is evoked, then he's able to connect. So it still becomes a managed device, not approved, but a managed device that you have and can maintain the visibility to avoid the blind spots. I hope that answers the question about knowns and unknowns in the garden to the IT.
Oh yeah, I think and very great example. So thanks, Alvin. Badru, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, quick points from my side, especially for the unknown side of it. So again, I want to go back to the cyber security related use case where typically if you see over a period of time, people are talking about network auditing on VAPD testing, vulnerability assessment kind of models, right? And there were a lot of consultants who go after different enterprise and bigger customers. So they do specific auditing, and then they submit report and they do some corrective actions. But considering the newer developments and the newer way of doing things and the involvement of a lot of cloud-based solutions, I mean, still we will not be able to rely upon the same model. So there are specific advantages in doing that, but at the same time, there are some bottlenecks, right? Especially when you talk about any organization, how frequent they'll be able to do that auditing, because it involves a lot of change requests, a lot of process change, and also inconvenience to a lot of things, and there'll be downtimes, etc. So that's where they have to do, because there'll be some compliance and regulations. At the same time, it's very important for them to repeat that often, which is a bottleneck, I would say. So which will become a blind spot by itself, right? So I'll do it in the first quarter, then I'll do it in the last quarter, and then we stop. So now things are changing. That's where I wanted to come into a concept called breach and attack simulation, right? which is a BaaS market, which is growing at the rate of 40% year on year. If you talk about what is BaaS, we are also providing those solutions, which is a newer solution which we are released to the market. Here we are talking about trusted hosts which are in your existing network, right? And these are like any other host within your network. It could be in any platform, Windows, Linux, or Mac, or whatever you name it. And these are the agents which will try to reach or breach your network because it is protected well by your security appliances. We are talking about a centralized dark cloud which is trying to contact this agent, or the agent is trying to reach the dark cloud, and it is set up in a controlled manner so that it doesn't create any other unwanted stuff for the existing trusted host or network, but it is trying to use some of the vulnerabilities which may be present on the existing network and then try to reach the dark cloud. And that's where if you're able to do that, if our agent is able to communicate to the dark cloud, so that's where we can know, okay, there are some vulnerabilities within my network which are not known to me, right, as of today. And not only that, we also need to know what are those vulnerabilities, where it is happening, what component level it is happening in my network, and how can I remediate. And we need suggestions, we need the proof that this has happened in my network. So which is what which is gaining a lot of momentum. So now we are not anymore talking about just VAPD testing which happens or just for compliance reason in a lot of organizations. So I think we have to move faster, and it is already a lot of customers are moving, and it is growing at the very fast pace. So breach and attack simulation is one area I would like to highlight when we are talking about the unknown factors.
Great. I think
just one more point, just one last point. I'm sorry. You jolted my memory with something what we call continuous monitoring.
Yes.
And again, that's where if you have the whitelist, that anything that falls into a blacklist, or that's where if you have your perimeters, say for example, you detect that a device that's connected to your network is using an out-of-date software. So normally you use Tenable. So I like to say audit is just a capture of a slice in time. You are in audit for this day, and the 364 days before and 365 days before, you're out of audit, or you're not necessarily in audit. So this is where you need to maintain that constant monitoring and watch, and to look at, when you detect something which is abnormal, how do you invoke a reaction, a response to correct the situation on the spot. And this is where this is really important, especially right now, because the network is such a dynamic space. There are many points of entry and exit into the network, especially right now. The attack surface have enlarged. We have so many entry points into the organization that organization needs to look at this as a strategy as well. Their ability to continuously monitor and continuously remediate. So back to the earlier discussion, I talked about automation and orchestration for that to be, embedded into the DNA of this kind of defenses so that you minimize your blind spot.
Great. I think I see Ehsan, I know we are on top of that. So I'll pass on the control to you, Ehsan, but just a couple of minutes before that. I think we had a great discussion, right? We covered the scenarios. I think one scenario that perhaps people will be thinking, what about unknown? I believe unknown is something like a COVID. And again, we covered that in various ways when we talk about training, when we talk about continuous monitoring. I think those things would really aid you to be ready for something that can really go wrong, and you don't know what could it really go wrong. Because we know before 9/11, nobody would have assumed that you could have a plane that could hit a tower and you could have a complete office come down. Before COVID, nobody would have believed you if you had to say that what if 95% of the people had to work from your home for 9 months. I'm sure people would have said, see a good doctor and get yourself treated, right? So we know unknowns will always be something that's beyond our comprehension. But I think we covered that in details, that when you put focus on your processes, when you put focuses on your people, I think Alvin and Badri did mention that it's not that every time you see a challenge, you have to invest on a tool. You have to look around your processes. You have to look around what is it that you want to achieve. And there would always be a lot that you can achieve with what you have, rather than to invest always on a newer tool. So I think that has been some great insights. And with this, Ehsan, I pass on the control to you. I don't know if we even have time for question and answers, but if there are, we have, quite enlightened, set of the leaders, we'll be very happy to take the questions. Over to you, Ehsan.
Thanks a lot, dear speaker. The session was really wonderful and a lot of insights we have got on the blind spot of the network. Really, thanks a lot, Mr. Badri. Thanks a lot, Elvin, and thanks a lot, Kalpesh. Thanks a lot for the session.
Well, thank you very much to everybody for joining this session.
Thanks, everyone. I'm sure a great learning experience and keep learning. Thanks, everybody. Take care. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Have a great day.